Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I'm Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Tony Gold. This is our post-match show of Fulham's 1-1 draw against Spurs. I did a full-time show after the match yesterday. Well, Tony was at the match, so I thought it would be great to have him on and do a full post-match show, which we'll be doing for the next 45 minutes to an hour, possibly. And then Tony and I will be back on the Cottage Talk Patreon page tomorrow doing our player rating show. So we're waiting one day for the player rating show. Too much to talk about in regards to this match, Tony. So listen, let's not waste any time. Let's get to it. And you and I have talked about this off air. You were at the match. I'm just going to say it right off the bat to get us going. This is 2 points dropped by Fulham. Fulham should have won the match. I know it's easy to look back at it, but you were there. Tell me that Spurs were second best, because they were.
Yeah, from the outset, we seemed to command the game from the get-go. Spurs had a few players out, obviously, but look, based on the fact that we had a thumping last week against Wolves at home, it was all about a response, Russ. And for me, the response was absolutely superb. From Leno all the way through to Raul, it was a great response, great performance. Without question, we should have won the game. There'll be conjecture about, well, Tottenham had a few chances and they should have done this and should have done that. But on our first half display alone, I couldn't believe that we'd gone in at half time and had not scored a goal, that we were that dominant. And honestly, and I said to my son at half time, I said, you know what? It's going to be typical Tottenham. They'll come out second half and they'll score a Jarzy goal and we'll be chasing the game. And that's exactly what happened. We went 1-0 down in a game that we were dominating in and should have been, ahead in. And, full credit, our heads didn't go. We carried on. We battled well. Silva made some very positive changes. And that got us back into the game. And it's frustrating because it was a game that was there for the taking. But once again, the thing that's hurting us, and I did say this months ago, not having an out and out number 9 is going to hurt us this season in games, and that was evident yesterday.
Okay, very good. And you have said that many times, and I believe I even talked about that on the full-time show because many fans were commenting on it, and rightfully so, because when you look at a match like that, and you can make the argument, I actually listened to a couple Spurs podcasts. All that they were doing was they were giving a little credit to Fulham, but they were complaining about the injuries. They were complaining about this and that about Spurs, but like I said, a little credit to Fulham. But all I heard was mostly about the injuries. And okay, fair enough. But I'll counter you with talking about Spurs' opportunities. So besides the goal, because the goal, give them credit for the goal, their other opportunities in the first half were self-inflicted wounds by Fulham. So what did they really create, Tony? We created all the opportunities in the first half. I think that's the big difference. That's what I watched was we go to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I've talked about this to you in length. I want Fulham to get that signature victory on the road that I think would propel them this season. We were that close. I think winning there would have been that signature win. But the performance was there. They just could not finish. And that is the disappointing part. And like you said, the sucker punch, it's too predictable, Tony, after all this time of being a Fulham supporter. I've seen it too many times. So good call by you by saying that to your son, because you ended up being right and you texted me right afterwards. So, fair enough, because you could see it coming. You could actually see all these opportunities. And we also had opportunities in the second half. You know what's even more irritating, Tony, before we move on from just our opening thoughts on the match? The fact that they started the second half brightly. They don't normally do that. And then to get that sucker punch, Tony, that hurt.
Yeah, it's as you say, we've seen it so many times as a Fulham fan. Fulham fans, we've seen it. We can almost read the script. Look, considering how we started the game, Bassi giving that ball across our box. Son really should have scored there, and that could have been a whole different story. Had that gone in. But again, it's a lack of concentration in the key area of the park. Robinson, then his back pass, another one where that could have been different. Then we give away 2 really dangerous free kicks on the edge of our box. That Maddison is dangerous and deadly from those positions. But thankfully, he didn't make the most of those. So they did have opportunities, but like you say, Russ, they were self-inflicted more than anything. And you can't give a team like Tottenham any hope or any opportunity like that, because normally they are ruthless and they will, punish you. When I saw Kulichevsky on the bench, I was like, wow. Ange has done us a big favour today by not playing him, because that guy's been, in absolute great form. So to have him sitting there, scratching his bum was good for us. But look, as I said, in terms of football, we did dominate large parts of the game. It's certainly from a possession point of view. Unfortunately, we just didn't do enough with that in terms of converting it into goals. And that is something that Silva has to address, Russell. We cannot ignore it. We have to address it. Raul and Munez don't have the goals in them. They just don't.
Well, honestly, Tony, I think they both have had their time of having purple patches, right? But they're not consistently scoring goals for us. And I think that is holding us back. I'm now to the point where I have to agree with that. I do agree with that. And I think it needs to be addressed in January, because not that I want Mitro back, but Mitro scores 2 or 3 goals in that game. Let's just call like it is. He really does. And especially that one early with Jimenez, where, it was just a wonderful pass from Iwobi, setting him up perfectly. Sorry, that to me is a goal from Mitro. But that's kind of what we're dealing with, and that's what they have to deal with. We're talking about the Cons, that team that is going to make decisions in January, along with Marco. They have to address it. They cannot leave Fulham short, because this is a true opportunity to get into Europe. I'm now convinced of it, because they're that good. The performances are that good. They just don't have the cutting edge consistently to be in Europe. Well, go get it in January. So I'm there with you, Tony. I am. All right. So let's move on to my section I call the good, the bad, and who won the coaching battle. We're going to talk about the coaching battle, because I find that a fascinating part of this match. But let's start with the good, and I'll get us going. And you and I did a preview show, and we talked about Fulham's defense and concerns about it. Well, I got to tell you, I thought the defense played very well. I'm going to get us going. And on the Fulham website, on the Fulham X page, the player that won for Fulham was Issa Diop, Tony. Let's give him some credit.
Yeah, you've absolutely. The good was the fact that we actually defended really well as a collective unit yesterday. Chalk and cheese compared to last week at Wolves, against Wolves. Yesterday, we looked organised. We looked sharp. We won our battles. We won our tackles. Other than that first, moment of madness from Bassi, he was solid. You've got to give Diop absolute credit for coming in and putting in pretty much a faultless performance at centre half. He was calm. He didn't try and take any risks. He just did his job. And as I say, as a back four collectively, I thought we actually and with Leno there as well, who obviously was called upon, made 2 terrific saves as well, which he needed to do. So yeah, I mean, you wouldn't have known that Anderson, we were missing Anderson yesterday, because to be honest with you, they were solid. Going forward as well, they the 2 fullbacks provided a great outlet, and they defended and they did what they needed to do. Again, the goal they scored, could we have done better with that? Probably, but in the main, at least we looked, solid, and that's something we didn't look against Wolves the week before.
Very good point, Tony. And I want to go back and talk a little bit about Calvin Bassey, because you talk about the error earlier in the game, but also Steve Reynolds actually mentioned this on the Full-Time Show. He commented about how he really gutted this out, because I thought he got himself injured in this match, and he still played on where, again, and maybe in certain circumstances, he could have come off, but he gutted that out, and I thought played very well. You could have maybe some fault on him on that goal. if you watch it back. But beyond that, solid performance.
Yeah, look, he was a threat at set pieces for us. He was always a threat. He was causing their defenders problems. But like I said, at the end of the day, he's in there to defend first and foremost. And him and Diop looked like they'd been playing for months.
Yep.
And it was a great, as I say, great collective performance from us in terms of, given what happened last week against Wolves,
Okay.
where we were all over the place for
Yep.
for periods. So no, it was good to see. Would have liked a clean sheet, but you know what? You take the positives from it.
Okay. I want to add two other names in the good column. And in fact, there are probably several that I'm going to be leaving out, but we can leave that for the player rating show. I want to talk about playing Berga and Lukic together, Tony. This to me, this is what it should be. I'm now convinced of it. And I think Berga gets better and better every match, Tony. And Lukic looks like he never left. So unfortunately, we're going to miss him in the Brighton match because of his suspension. That's going to hurt. But I got to tell you, I'm liking what I'm seeing from the combination of the two of them, especially on the road.
They were superb yesterday. And there's no Fulham fan on the planet that's going to tell me that Pereira comes back into that position. And no, they were colossus. They were colossal yesterday, both of them, absolutely colossal. Lukic was outstanding. I thought it was very harsh. I thought for him to come off at the point, but then you know what? I can see what Silva was trying to do, and it paid off.
Yeah, it
But
did.
Berger's just getting better and better and better. And I did say that he's a player that needs to play regularly and get games and keep his sharpness and his fitness to see the best of him. And I think now you're seeing it. And if we can, if Silva can enhance that partnership moving forward, then it could be really, really important for us moving into the bigger games that we've got coming up. And I just don't see how, as you say, unfortunately, Lucas is suspended on Thursday,
Yep.
which is a bit of a downer. But you know what? They were superb yesterday. Really, they dominated the midfield and stopped Tottenham really creating anything of any note.
I was going to say they didn't create anything, and I think a lot comes down to those two guys. I think that they
Definitely.
were vital to that middle of the pitch. And moving forward, I want to see those two guys together. And I'm going to share this comment from Black, White, and Fred. This is what he says. With some more time, Berg and Lukic should be able to both be perfect 6 to 8 hybrids. And I agree with that. That's what's great about them, is that I think they can play off of each other and change the roles when needed. And that, to me, this is what it should be, Tony. We'll talk about Pereira at some point because there's obviously people probably want to hear us talk about Pereira, but I'm going to push that aside. But when you look at how Fulham are being built, you look at the fact that they lost João Palhinha, and now you're getting these two guys basically putting themselves forward and taking advantage of their opportunities. And this looks so good together. Just thoughts on what Black, White, and Fred just shared there.
Yeah, he's absolutely, he's correct. He's right. I mean, if you watched it yesterday closely and you watched the technical side of the game, forget about the result and just what they both did from a technical and tactical perspective. As I said, given what you saw the week before against Wolves with Pereira in there, it's chalk and cheese, Russ. And what those two do is they know how to defend out of possession. And that's the big difference. And that's what you saw yesterday. As Steve Reynolds has just said right there, Berger's positioning was excellent, and it really was. If you look at both of them, when we were out of possession of the ball, they were always in the right place at the right time. They didn't try and overplay. They didn't try to be clever. They did their jobs, moved the ball to the players that could affect the game, and that's why we looked a completely different unit in there yesterday. Totally different.
Totally agree, Tony. Okay, so that's the good. Like I said, when we do the player rating show, which will be on the College Talk Patreon page, we'll go through other players. Wolby was great too. We can talk about Reece Nelson. There's some really good performances, but I want to now move along and talk about the bad. And not that there was a lot of bad, but I think we've already talked a little bit about it. So let's talk about Raul Jimenez. And I just want to say it's not from a lack of effort, Tony. He's just not able to score right now. I think he's struggling a little bit. I think he's trying too hard, and it's just not coming off. There was one point where you got to give Fraser Forster some credit for a nice save, but beyond that, there was the first opportunity where he really should have scored it. And the announcers I listened to said the same, that he should have scored there. What are your thoughts of the situation with Raul?
Look, it's twofold, really. Just, you can't fault his effort yesterday, Russell. I watched him closely at times. He's running off the ball. He's closing down. He's challenging. All those things that you want from your number nine. He did that. You can't fault, and he'll be disappointed that he didn't score yesterday. Believe me, he will be one of the first people coming off that pitch really frustrated. But the bottom line is that the way that Fulham set up and the way that Fulham play, you really need all those attributes, but you need to have a bit of pace as well. And that's one thing he lacks in that position. So, when I said to you yesterday about, with the last 15, 20 minutes, I would have thrown Traore. I know this is going to be, people are going to think I've lost my mind, but I genuinely would have thrown Traore up there and gone, do you know what? Just use your pace to get him behind, because Tottenham were there, honestly, to get him behind those two centre-halves yesterday, especially Ben Davies. Traore would have given him nightmares, absolute nightmares. But it's so evident where we're lacking. And that area at the moment is an area that, as you say, it needs to be addressed in January. Silva, I'm sure, is well aware of it. And, that's something that needs to change. But look, I like Raul because of the effort, because of what he gives us. But unfortunately, he's just not that player that's going to get you, a goal every game or a goal every 2 games, whatever it may be. He's just not that player.
He's not. Like I said, both him and Muniz have had their share of purple patches, but we need more than that. We need consistency, like I said at the beginning of the show. And it's evident. And it has to be evident to the powers that be. They need to do something in January. Whether it's on loan, whether it's permanent, I don't care. You can't leave this team like this for the rest of the season with a wonderful opportunity ahead of them. It's like they almost got all the pieces in place except for one piece. You need to get that piece. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what it takes. Do not leave this team short by not getting a striker. That's the way I'm looking at it. That's why I'm glad we're talking about it. In regards to the bad, I'm going to mention it because we'll talk about it a little bit later, because it is a little bit the good and the bad. It's Tom Kearney. Now, I will say this, Tony, that I don't think Kearney meant to do any harm to the player at all. I just think it was a situation, but I've watched it back. If it's not for VAR, I think it's a yellow card, but with VAR, if you really watch it, it's a red card. Your thoughts?
Yeah, we all know that Kearney's not that type of player. He's come on, he's trying to make an impact. There was a ball to be won. It's a bad tackle, and it looks worse when you slow it down and all that stuff. And we know what happens when you slow it down, and it always looks worse. But we can't argue. At the end of the day, look, in real time, the referee didn't think it was a sending off. He thought it was a yellow card. But as I say, it goes to VR, they look at it, they slow it down, they then start to, and then obviously it does look probably a lot worse than really what it was. But Kearney's not that sort of player. He's not going into that tackle to hurt anybody. But look, at the end of the day, in the modern game today, the way it is, it's a red card, and that's it. So he has to take that one on the chin, which is a shame because we lose him for 3 games now, I think. So that's a bummer, and a bummer for him as well. But it's something that we've got to sort out. Our disciplinary at the moment is we're getting players sent off too often at the moment. It's something we've got to be careful of.
I totally agree. What's interesting about Silva's style and the way that he puts out his players, he wants them to be aggressive. And Marco actually talked about this after the match. He wants someone like Kearney to be more aggressive. But again, he's telling him to go ahead and do that. This is an unfortunate situation that happens when you have a style and these things happen. It's basically you're trying to not go over the edge, and sometimes you go over the edge, and this is one of those cases, but it was not on purpose. It really wasn't. He was just being more aggressive, and unfortunately, now he's going to be out, and Fulham are going to have to deal with it. I will say that there's a young player, you and I were talking about it off air, maybe he finally gets a chance to play, and that's Josh King. He can play in central midfield. You could also move a Wobie in there if you need to. So there are options. There are absolutely options in there. Harry Wilson can play the number 10 role if you need him to. You can mix and match in there. So I think Kearney is going to be a miss. I think Lukic is a bigger miss, but now we have the emergence of Burgess. So I think even with situations like this, Tony, I think that they can overcome them even against Brighton, and that'll be a tough match. That's what's good about this team. I think that they have a lot of different players that can do different jobs and that can help out in different positions. I mean, Iwobi can do that. Obviously, I mentioned Harry Wilson too. So it's not like it's going to kill them against Brighton, but it's a loss. And let's just call it what it is. Okay. So let's finish up the section by talking about the coaching battle. And when I look back at it and I think about the three matches between these two managers, and I'll give the first one to Ange. You'll give the first one last season. The second one was Silva, this at Craven Cottage. And I think now he has won 2 out of these 3. When you're just talking about the tactics, setting his team up, making the right decisions with substitutions, this to me was a masterclass from Marco Silva. He won the coaching battle, Tony.
Yeah, he took a lot of criticism, and rightly so, last week with the game against Wolves, because I think he got a lot wrong. But yesterday, you can't argue. You know, his plan was pretty much executed to the point. You know, as I say, the only thing missing in the first half that he would have been disappointed with was the fact that Fulham didn't register a goal, because the way that they played football, dominated the possession and made those chances, you know, they really should have been up at the break. And then obviously, having gone a goal down, Silva's then in a position where he's looking at it and he's got to make some tough decisions. And he made them, and they paid off. And, you know, bringing Kearney on actually got us back in the game. Obviously, then the sending off happens, and, you know, you're thinking, oh, that's now cost us the game. So now we've got 17 minutes to hang on. But actually, Tottenham didn't really lay a glove on us after that, really. So,
Nope.
Look, in terms of the way we were set up, the way we played, the way we defended, the way that, you know, he seemed to get a tune out of all the players yesterday. He definitely won the battle in terms of that. Even though we came away with just a draw, if you break and analyse the game down, it's a game that we definitely should have won. And Ange probably knows that he's gained a point there, 100%.
He absolutely did it. This is 2 points drop, big time for Fulham Football Club. And Marco set the team up. And that's what's great, Tony, is that I want a manager that's going to put the players in the right position to succeed. Then it's on them. And it is on them. Like I said, we're talking about a great performance. A lack of finishing is the difference. Simple as that. That's what it comes down to. But it's not from the lack of game plan, the lack of moves from the manager. Those were all shown to us. They were all spot on. So major credit to Marco Silva. Sometimes he gets out coached. He's a genius, but sometimes he doesn't win the coaching battle. He won it here, and it's against a coach that many people think is a very good one. So for me, hands down, this one goes to Marco. Okay, my friend. Now we go to a little bit of an interesting discussion. Let's talk about the starting 11. And let's start here, because we could talk about this for a half hour. I don't want to spend a half hour talking about Pereira, but let's just talk about the starting 11, because that was the biggest omission, was Pereira. And there's been a lot going on since then. But let me take you back to when you saw the announcement, when you saw the starting 11 and the bench. What did you make of the decision to leave out Pereira?
If I could have thrown a party at that point, Russell, I would have done. The truth of the matter is, I couldn't care less what Pereira's done or hasn't done, is the honest truth. At the end of the day, it was the right decision. It was the right decision to go with Lukic and Berger. It was the right decision.
Big time.
Based on the result last week and the performances that Pereira's been putting in, it was the right decision. And actually, as I said to you, after that performance yesterday, and I know it's only a one-off game so far, so we've got nothing to compare it to, but there's no way that you can put Pereira back in there. I know now that Silva's got decisions to make because Lukic is suspended, which is a real shame, because I would love to have seen him go in against Brighton on Thursday, those two again, to see whether or not, you know, it was a one-off or whether it's actually something that could be built on. So we'll likely see Pereira back in there on Thursday. But then watch the performance, watch the difference in midfield if he does go back in there. People forget very quickly. So regardless of what he's done, what he said, the bottom line is this he doesn't have a place in this team anymore, because there are better players playing in his own position, and he doesn't fill that position that Silva's been trying to put him in. So do you know what? As far as I'm concerned, January can't come quick enough. And you know what? He needs to go now. He needs to go.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to mention this because you and I talked about this when we saw the announcement, and I think it's the right decision. Tactically, I think it's the right decision based on his play alone. But there's been a lot before and since then with the interview. Marco's talked about it that he did not make a decision based on the interview. So I'll give him, credit for that if that's truly that it was tactical. He said it was, I'm paraphrasing, tactical, fine. So if it's tactical, if it totally is about the match, well, right now, it's going to be an interesting call because I have a feeling he's going to come back in. But I'm with you just on merit alone, on the way he's playing. Forget about everything that has been said about this interview. I actually watched the video of his own words, okay? I'm going to put that aside. I'm totally going to just forget about that for 2 seconds and just base it on his performances. Not good enough. Time to move on. He'll have suitors. Get rid of them and get something back financially and reinvest it. I don't know, maybe in a striker. Sharker, right? I would take getting a striker for the money that we would get for Pereira and maybe throw in some more money to get an even better striker. But you can get a decent amount of money for Andreas Pereira. There's going to be money going to be thrown around, I think, in January this time around. And I think you need to take advantage of it because you've got players now, Tony, that can play his position. We haven't even mentioned in enough detail. Apparently, Josh King is really lighting it up in the basically the under 21s and all that. He's doing a great job. At some point, maybe you give him a chance over someone that will have offers in another place and is really not at the level where you want him to be. He's not. You have two players right now that I know it's one match, but you could see how that they complement each other. Why would you put someone else in there that doesn't fit into the number 8 just to make him happy? And let me ask you this before we move on talking about Pereira. Let's talk about the set pieces. How did you feel that they did with the deliveries on set pieces?
Do you know what? It was great to see different people, different players on them, to be honest. I don't think that they were great again yesterday, but actually our corners at least beat the first man most of the time. It's something that they need to work on because they've become so reliant on him, or he's the one that's just decided that he's going to take it. But, Lukic put in a couple of, a nice corner. I just think that ultimately that's something that we need to improve on, all round in terms of the set pieces. And it's actually really was evident yesterday, the fact that he's been on everything so far and the players haven't had an opportunity. But we've got enough quality in that team for players to put in a delivery. Smith Rowe, Iwobi,
Reece
Nelson, they can all deliver a ball.
Lukic was doing it too.
Playing the top of the game, so there's no reason why they can't do that. So ultimately, that's the last worry for me. Look, you hit the nail on the head. At the end of the day, this team, as I said, has transformed in terms of outgrown Pereira now. When he came in, there was a place for him because of the players around and what have you. Now we've brought in better players, the team's evolved, and he doesn't get into the team.
Right. And what's interesting, Tony, I'm glad that you said this because I've heard this about Fulham, that they need to be selling players to get other players. Okay, fine. I want them to keep their best players. But right now, you have an asset who I don't think fits in your team. This is actually a perfect situation for them where they can get rid of him and hopefully get better with the money that they get from this player. And like I said, invest in a striker. This is actually a good opportunity. You don't have to sell a Paulinho to get better. You can sell a player that really doesn't fit into what you're doing. And that, to me, is a wonderful situation to be in right now. This is not a bad situation for the club with Pereira. Now, I do think Pereira is going to play on Thursday. And it's funny because my friend Chris Goodwin, who is a Liverpool supporter, actually had a comment. I just want to share this. And he says, Pereira needs to repay Fulham fans with a performance if he plays Thursday. I would agree with that. And before we move on from Pereira, because I want to stop talking about this subject, but what do you think is going to be the reception?
I was just going to say it's going to be very interesting on Thursday. Look, as I say, I'm more focused about his performances, Russ. What he says behind doors or interviews or whatever, you got to take a lot of it with a pinch of salt, because ultimately, look, he's under contract. Fulham will deal with it. As you know, from my perspective, and Ross has hit the nail on it. I've never
Yep.
been a big fan of his from day dot. I always said, I've said it a million times, Manchester United don't get rid of good players, right? And there's a reason why Man United were happy to move him on and sell him. There was a reason why he was loaned out 3 or 4 times during his spell at Manchester United. There's a reason behind it. And the reason is he's just not good enough.
Yeah.
He's a good technical footballer who can pass the ball well. That's it. He's got no goals in him. In the position that he plays, he should be scoring 8 to 10 goals a season. Not even close. He can't
No.
take a free kick. He might think he can. He can't. So, you know what? If someone comes in for him in January with 20, 25 million, you take it and you run and you invest it. It's that
Exactly.
simple.
Exactly. And Fulham will be fine without Pereira. And
Yeah,
again,
100%.
I will just stress this. For me, this comes much more to do with his performances than the other stuff. I mentioned the other stuff because it irritated me, but I've tried to put that aside and just focus on the football, and it just isn't good enough. And then I look at other players that can do what they needed that position to be, and they can have someone else that can do the job. That to me is what it's about. Who can do the job and who's not getting the job done? Yes, he might be a square peg in a round hole as your number 8, but he's not your number 10 because you got someone better at that position. I could argue you might have 3 that are better at the position. Harry Wilson might be better. Iwobi, if you put him at a number 10, might be better. There are other players that if you put it at number 10 that are better than Pereira. I
But I'll
know
put
that
Wilson ahead of him all day long.
yeah. And I've heard the argument, well, he does all the pressing that Marco wants. And I get all that. But I think Fulham have evolved away from Pereira, as you said. I totally agree with that. Anyways, enough of talking about Pereira. Coming up next, Tony and I are going to break down the match, and we'll end with man of the match. If you're watching live, feel free to share who was your man of the match. Okay, Tony, let's get to it, and let's talk about the first half and get your thoughts on it. And I'll run us through just a couple of things, and then we'll get your overall analysis of the first half. But what's interesting about this match is that it didn't start well for Fulham, and Tottenham Hotspur came out basically with a strong intention that they were going to press Fulham, that they would put Fulham under a little bit of pressure. And I was a little nervous about this because I did not know how they would handle the pressure. We had a couple of self-inflicted wounds. That's where I want to start because that made me nervous to begin with. They overcame them. But the Bassi situation and the Robinson situation, both of them, there are 2 of them. Thankfully, you got Bernd Leno who took care of it. But your thoughts about the early stages of this match?
Yeah, look, I think, as I say, when you start games like that, in that stadium, that atmosphere, well, we won't say atmosphere because it wasn't an atmosphere, to be honest. One of all. But anyway, players switch off. Bassi had a moment of madness. I think that, I just don't think he saw Son when he played the pass. I just don't think he saw it. And as I said, that could have been a very different outcome. But thankfully, Leno managed to get there, made a great save. I think that settled us down, settled the nerves down. Mistakes are all a part of the game, unfortunately, and Fulham tend to make their fair share, in matches. But thankfully, we didn't get punished for them, whereas in previous games we have been punished for them. But look, at the end of the day, once we got over those issues and we settled into the game, and the players grew into the game, and they realised that actually this team was there for the taking, they stepped it up. Every single player, and certainly from midfield areas, in terms of, say Lukic and Berger were superb patrolling in there. It allowed Iwobi and Nelson to get on. It allowed Smith Rowe to, get into those spaces in behind their midfield and in front of their back four. And as I said, we passed and moved the ball really well. We did it with pace, we did it with tempo, we did it with purpose. And as I said, the only thing missing from our first half performance was a goal. That was it. That's the only negative you can take away from that first half performance.
Right. I would tend to agree with you on that, Tony. And let's talk about, because there were plenty of chances for Fulham. They were controlling the play. Like I said, they dictated what was going on. Tottenham might have had the ball, but when they lost the ball, we were at them very quickly with numbers. And that to me is what was impressive about this. Our fullbacks were phenomenal. We talk about them, that their number one job is to defend, but boy, can they go forward and can they influence a match when they do go forward, and they can be what I would call a two-way player. I'm talking about both of them. I thought they both did their job very well. But when you look at the opportunities, the one that stands out to me first is this one, and then we'll talk about the other. There are several in this first half, but it's the pass from Iwobi that sets up Raul. And like I said, the announcer said he has to score here, Tony. What are your thoughts when you saw that? And then we'll talk about the other one from Iwobi that stands out.
Yeah, but how many times have we said this in games, Russ? He has to score. It's not the first time that Raul's got into a position like that and not scored. And I said that comes down to the fact that nothing against Raul in terms of what he gives the team, holistically, but we are missing that predator, that player that when he gets into those positions, if that ball had fallen to Solanke yesterday, it's a goal.
Oh, yeah,
it's a goal. If that ball falls to Isak, it's a goal. If that ball falls to Salah, it's a goal. That's the difference. We are missing that predator, that clinical finisher. And until we find it, we are going to have those frustrating moments where we have these players in those positions, and Muniz is no different.
Yep.
They just, it's hit and miss. They might score next week. He might not. You just don't know. And unfortunately, yesterday, he didn't take it.
He did not. He had a couple of opportunities in the first half. The one that I actually thought was in the back of the net, but I jumped out of my seat, was the opportunity from Alex Iwobi, which had a slight deflection and went off the crossbar, Tony. I thought that was in the back of the net. That was the opportunity that stood out. And that was a great chance, a great shot from Iwobi. He did nothing wrong, but there was a slight deflection, which I think took it from being a goal.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, It was very unlucky. It was a good move, great effort, and with a little bit more luck, that could have easily have gone in. But you're right, the deflection sort of maybe took it a little bit out, and that was another opportunity, another chance. But we've just got to try and be a little bit more clinical in those situations, in those moments, because once you go a goal up in a game like that, you take control, and Tottenham have to come at you. And where we are really good is when teams are pressing down us and we can hit them on the counter and get at them. And it ebbs and flows in those moments. But unfortunately, again, we just weren't clinical enough.
Right, we carved them up, Tony. We were at them constantly, but there was no end product, and that's the difference in 1 point to 3 points. It's as simple as that. Okay, let's transition. Let's talk about the second half. And you and I talked about this earlier, but I want to just start here because Fulham, for a while now, have been terrible starters in the beginning of the second half. I don't know what it is, but they've been terrible for a while now. Well, they weren't terrible here until we got to the goal. They came out strong. I remember the opportunity from Alex Iwobi, but there was constant pressure. It's like nothing had changed since the first half. They just couldn't score. Then, unfortunately, you get the sucker punch. I'm going to name the player that scored the goal because he was anonymous, and I mean anonymous until this goal. In fact, the announcers said his name, that he had done nothing up until this point. I'm paraphrasing exactly what they said. But Brennan Johnson did nothing up until he scores the goal. But he was predatory, so you have to give him credit there. And they scored the goal. And I think at that point, we're probably all saying, I'm sure you were saying at the ground with your son, here we go again.
Yeah, look, Johnson, yeah, he didn't do too much yesterday, but the bottom line is that he's scoring goals for us. He's getting into the right areas and he's scoring goals. I don't know whether that was his sixth or seventh goal of the
Yeah,
season so far,
yeah, he's scoring
but
goals.
Fulham haven't got a player in their squad that scored that many goals this season. So that tells you everything you need to know. Sometimes you can be anonymous, but good players turn up at the right time and score, and that's what he did yesterday. And yeah, listen, football is not rocket science. You know, at the end of the day, if you don't punish teams when you're on top, and teams are kept in it like Tottenham with the quality that they have, they can punish you. And at that moment, still 0-0 when Fulham should have been, you know, 1 or 2 ahead. They're still in the game. They're still in the game, and you know they're going to create opportunity. They will get one opportunity, and that opportunity came. Johnson took it, and that's the difference. And then suddenly you're sitting there scratching your head, frustrated to hell because you're thinking, how are we in this position now? How? How are we now looking at defeat when we've absolutely dominated and
I
bossed
know.
them? And yeah, it's that old adage, and you're thinking this is Fulham all over, you know?
Yeah. However, they had an answer this time. So now let's talk about Kearney's goal. But before that, we have the double substitution. And I want to give a lot of credit to Marco for making this substitution. Maybe at the time I was thinking, I'm not sure about this, but he brings on Tom Kearney and brings on Harry Wilson. And he pulled the right levers here, Tony. So you have, again, the goal from Kearney, which was a fantastic goal set up once again from Alex Iwobi, I believe it was. And you get the equalizer. I think you got a good look at this. Your thoughts on the equalizer?
Yeah, I was right behind it. It was a great finish. But that's Tom Kearney. That's, you know, he has that ability, he has that quality, and more often than not, when he gets into that situation or that position and he pulls the trigger, it's going in. And it was a great finish, and fully deserved.
Yep.
Fully deserved. It was a brave substitution, a brave double substitution from Silva. You're absolutely right. Look, I think Nelson played very well. But again, just lacking that cutting edge in the final third. And why not? Harry Wilson's in a rich vein of form,
Yeah,
deserved to come on. And actually, he carried on where he left off. You know, where he's been leaving off.
absolutely.
Came on, was a real handful, was a threat. Really unlucky not to score as well when he burst through, and
Oh,
just took another burst and got in there and just he was unlucky, really unlucky.
yeah.
Deserved to score there. And then obviously, Lukic, I felt, didn't do anything wrong. So it was a brave change, but it was the right one because ultimately it got us back into the game.
It did, Tony. And like I said, sometimes the manager pulls the right levers. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes we can be very critical because I don't think he always makes the right substitutions at the right time. He got this one right, and I think it was brave. And that's the way that this man wants to do it. He wants his players to be brave. I guess he needs to be brave too, and he did that in this match. He took a
Well, what
chance.
he did is he left it with about at least half an hour to go.
Yeah.
So it gave the players the opportunity to get into the flow of the game
Yep.
and to actually make an impact rather than making it with 20 minutes to go or 15 minutes to go, where really players need time to get into the game. They need time to get up to speed with the tempo and everything. So yeah, fair play to him. He did well there.
Okay. So now we have to go back to the bad, and let's talk about Kearney gets sent off. And you and I already talked about it. And you actually asked me after the match if I had a good view of it, and I got to see it really slowed down. And this is unfortunate. Like I said, I believe this. There's no way of knowing this, Tony, but I have a feeling that if we're full strength, we're not down a man, we have a legitimate chance to win this match in the last 15 minutes. I truly believe that. But he gets sent off. We know that everything's going to change, and it does. And this is unfortunate because the Fulham captain, does not intend to do any harm to this player.
No, it was a shame. It did ultimately, stop us from potentially going on to win the game. It's not to say that Tottenham couldn't have gone on to win the game, but even when we went down to 10 men,
They did nothing, by the
they
way.
did nothing. No, we marshaled them well enough, and but it just meant that we couldn't be as adventurous as we maybe Silver would have liked. He just
Right.
maybe thought, what, shut up shop now, make sure we don't give anything silly away, and that sort of that last 17 minutes sort of took it, with injury time, etc. sort of ended our real chances of winning that. Although Harry Wilson did have that chance, to be fair.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to
Yeah,
talk
but
about
look,
that.
at the end of the day, as I said, when you slow these things down, they do look a lot worse. It was a bad tackle.
Yep.
When you slow it down and you look at it, it's a red card. In the nature of the way the game is now, it's a red card.
Totally agree. I said that to you. It's a red card, and it is what it is. Now, I think it would have been easy at this point to think any Fulham supporter, they're going to lose this now. They are absolutely going to lose this now. Everything is going in favor of Spurs, and it just didn't turn out that way. You have to give a lot of credit to Marco, the players, for seeing the match out. We'll talk about the very end, the opportunity from Harry Wilson, but I want to give a little bit of a shout out to a player that has not been able to feature that much and was playing against his former team. I want to give a little shout out to Ryan Sessegnon, okay? Because he played a role in this. Whether it's a small role, it was still a role. He played a role in this. It must have been a little bit emotional playing against his former team, but he's first and foremost a Fulham player. So there must have been a little feeling going with him playing against Tottenham. But he did his job, and the players did their job, Tony. And like we're talking about, when you talk about seeing the match out, and I'm thinking about how much time they had left, which I think was with stoppage time, about 15 minutes. I'm thinking, this is a lot of time to see this match out. But they certainly did. And Spurs created nothing, as you and I just said. But I do want to end by talking about Harry Wilson. And I want to be the first to say that I've been critical of him, thinking that he's not a starter in the Premier League, that he is someone that might be at best like a star in the Championship, maybe can come off the bench in the Premier League. I want to give him credit, man. He is playing his socks off right now. He is playing with so much confidence and could have scored a goal here. He took it upon himself. Tony, what a move from Harry Wilson. Talk about being brave. That kid is brave, and I want to give him full credit. I'm glad that he's still with us. I'm glad I'm wrong, because I'm going to say I'm wrong right now. He should be with Fulham because he is a player that's playing with so much confidence. I want him to be at Fulham. What are your thoughts about that last opportunity from Fulham with Harry Wilson?
Well, just speak before we go on to that. I'm glad you gave little Sessegnon a little mention there, because it was good to see him. And actually, at the end of the game, you wouldn't have seen it, but he's very unassuming and very shy. But what happened was, when the players came over to applaud the away fans, they were clapping and they were like singing, Sessegnon is one of our own. And he started clapping, and actually Iwobi and Bassi grabbed him and threw him in front of the Fulham fans and said, look, you take your moment, you enjoy it.
That's
this is
great.
what it's about. And he came out very shy, and he was like, giving it all that. And it was good to see. It was good to see. And, listen, he came on, and like you say, he did what he could in those moments. But yeah, it was good. It was nice to see him come on and have that moment. It was good for him. But look, in terms of Harry Wilson, I think that, look, for me, I'm going to go all out and say, do you know what? For me, he starts against Brighton. I'd throw him in against Brighton, and I'd start him. Just as Traore hadn't done anything wrong, and just as Nelson hasn't done anything wrong, I think Harry Wilson is a goal threat at the moment.
Yeah.
And he's got goals in him. He's definitely a threat. I would start him against Brighton.
Okay.
I'll give him a go. Give him a go. Give him a run. See what happens.
That's a big call coming from you, that you and I have talked about him, and it just shows when a player basically is doing his job and showing that intent and playing with that confidence, he can change the narrative. And he has flipped it on its side, my friend. He is now a player that is dangerous, and I would say more dangerous than our strikers right now. He's more dangerous.
Do you know what it is, Russ? He looks like a player that's fighting for his position.
Yeah.
He's got a competition in there. He knows he has to up his game, and he's done that. He's upped his levels. He's upped his game. So ultimately, when he's come on, every time he's come on, he's made an impact in some way, shape, or form. Give him a run. Give him a chance. Let's see what he can do from the start. Let's see.
Okay, excellent stuff. All right, I'm going to share a couple more comments. This is from Ross. He says, hands down, we would have won talking about if Kearney doesn't get sent off. Ross says this. A few Spurs fans said to me as I walked out that we was robbed. We just need a striker. We've talked about that over and over again. And I want to share this from Steve Reynolds before we go to man of the match. And says, we've trained playing the 5 at the back, and it was good. Sess at DM. That's very interesting. Good stuff there. Okay. All right, Tony. Let's go to man of the match to end the show. On full-time, I actually gave it to Kenny Tete. I thought Kenny Tete was solid, a player that just continues just to do his job. I think you can go to where the Fulham supporters did on the Fulham social media account where they gave it to Diop. So I'm giving it to Tete. Who are you going to give it to?
Do you know what? There are a handful of players that could have got my man of the match yesterday. A handful of players, because they were absolutely. I thought Anthony Robinson yesterday was absolutely outstanding.
Yeah.
At left back, honestly, the work he does off the ball, Russ, people don't notice it much, but I tell you, he was absolutely outstanding. But for me, Tete was outstanding. I thought Lukic and Berger were immense, but just because of the amount of time that he's been out of the team and to be thrown into that game and then to perform like he did, I think Issa Diop for me has to get the man of the match. Has to.
That's great. That's great. Oh, by the way, Chris Goodwin, who's a Liverpool supporter, if you're still watching, you're not getting Anthony Robinson. Okay, just you can forget that. You're not
no chance.
Unless you want to give us £100 million, unless you want to go there, because I don't see Fulham selling him at all, and they shouldn't. Absolutely not.
They can't.
They can't. They absolutely can't. You might want him, but you're not going to get him. And I'm sure Chris is probably seeing this and going to respond at some point. So I got a response. So noted, Russ. Yes. This is from Black, White, and Fred. Jedi is too old for Liverpool. Okay. Let's see. Oh, this is interesting from Steve Reynolds. Diop, a reminder to Joachim Anderson. That's very good. And Black, White, and Fred gives it to Diop as well. So we've got some good comments. Tony, this show has flown by. Thank you so much for doing this with me. We're going to do a player rating show on the Cottage Talk Patreon page on Tuesday, but I thought, hey, listen, let's do a post-match show live so everyone can watch and listen. And as we're about to end the show, Tony, I want to let you know, in case you don't know, we have 142 people with us live right now. So that should
Fantastic.
Just tell you
Brilliant.
that people want to talk on Fulham, and we're going to continue to give it to them. So thank you, everyone that has watched live. Any final thoughts before we go, Tony?
No, look, as I said, it's a positive performance to build on. Let's hope we can find, bring that consistency to Brighton on Thursday. That's not going to be an easy game. We know that. It's going to be very interesting to see what Silva does in that key area, key position. But I think, look, we got to take a lot of positives from that performance yesterday, but we've got to start turning, that the possession, we've got to start turning that into goals. And at the moment, I don't know. Like I said, for me, I would honestly throw Traore on there and give him an opportunity, because he's not going to do any worse than Raul or Muniz. Obviously, he's not going to be able to give you that, that hold-up play necessarily, or, winning balls in the air. But what he is going to give you is, he's going to fight for everything. He's going to be a real nuisance. And you saw what he did at Manchester City, Russ. You saw what he did, what he can do. Why not give it a go? We've got nothing to lose. I'd give him a few games up there and try him. I really would.
I'm going to throw this out there. Not that he can hold the ball up. Would you consider, because he can run with pace, would you consider Harry Wilson up there?
I'm not sure that he's got the physical presence necessary to do that role. I think you've got to be, a certain build and a certain way. And obviously that would also change the way that potentially Fulham would have to play. Okay. I think because of the, they play with that 9 for a reason, and the wide players. But I just think for something different, to try something different, because we're just getting no goals from Raul at the moment, and Muniz, we know. Why not? And what's Traore done? Why is Traore not even getting a look in at the moment? I don't know.
It's very strange.
Yeah, it is. So, look, I don't know. Look, I'm just throwing it out there as an option and something to think about. But yeah, it will never happen. But yeah.
Okay, very good. Like I said, you just threw that out there, and I was just thinking to myself, because I know he's played that role a few times. Would they consider that? In fact, I think they played it once for full. Oh no, I'm sorry. I was thinking of Dan James when they threw Dan James against Everton. That's what I was thinking of. that time when they did that, which actually worked at Goodison Park. I don't think they've obviously ever played Harry Wilson in that role, but I was just trying to think of a different option someone would pace. But like you said, it would change how Fulham played. If they put Traore up there, it doesn't really change how Fulham play. So that's a good point. That's a much better call than mine. I was just trying to think outside the box, but yours makes more sense than mine. All right. Well, Tony, listen, this has been a great show. I do want to wrap this up. I want to thank everyone that has watched live on this show. If you haven't checked out the Cottage Talk Patreon page, please do check it out. Tony and I will be back on Tuesday with a player rating show, and that is exclusive to Patreon paid members along with other shows. So if you're interested, please do check it out. Okay. Well, let's wrap this up. For Tony Gold, I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the Talk Sport Fan Network.